Okay. All right. You would be able to hear now. Oh my God, there's two of me. That is like way too much. That is way too much me. So I am going to get rid of this one. All right. Can you guys hear me now? Yay. All right. I am on my phone now, which is weird. I just had this little thought yesterday that I should get on my phone. So get my phone set up. So yes, guess what? You can do StreamYard on your phone. So now this story is going to get much shorter because I have to hold my phone up with one arm. But you know what? We're still moving on. We will not be deterred. Just like that day when I saw a ghost. So I guess you couldn't see all my fancy stuff that I was saying, like super heartfelt. That was like Emmy award-winning stuff that I shared earlier. But you know, super rare now. You don't get to hear it. But I was talking about Spec Fair. Yay, this is Spec Fair. And if you go to specfair.com, you can see the lineup of all of this stuff. What we're doing today, next up, is going to be a workshop with Amy Zollers. Go to the dealer room, and I seriously won't, rehash everything. And also, if you go to ironwriters.com, the new prompts just dropped for the Iron Writer Challenge, and lots of great prizes coming up with that, including the champion of Iron Writers in June will win a book coaching from me. I will go over whatever manuscript they have, any genre, even porn. I am not shy. I will go over that. We'll get it formatted, and they can publish it however they want or not publish it, but basically it will be up to them, whatever they want to do. So that's going to be the grand prize. And then we have monthly prizes, which are Spec Fair booths and all sorts of stuff like that. But I was already deep in ghost story mode, so I'm going to go back there. But I'm going to get a drink of water because that was like pretty freaky. We have had so many weird tech issues this morning, so the ghosts are here. It is really Halloween. So, all right, going into the ghosts. I'm trying to think of, I guess I'll start from the beginning because nobody knows what I was saying. And then I have the added benefit of trying to hold this phone where I can see myself. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so ghost story. This is the story of the time when I met a Nukekubi, which is a type of Japanese ghost. So at the time, I did not know that's what it was called. I didn't find out until about a month ago that it was called a Nukekubi. And I'm probably mispronouncing that. My Japanese linguist daughter gave me a pronunciation. Nukekubi is how this is pronounced. Nukekubi. But I'm probably going to like super butcher it because I barely speak English sometimes. So anyways, it was in Tennessee. I had been in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where I had grown up, and my parents had joined the military, or my mother had joined the military. This is me backing up now. Where was I? My mother had joined the military, and so they were moving to Washington, D.C. And in the process of moving from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Washington, D.C., I got stuck in Sweetwater, Tennessee, which was a huge culture shock. And I am not dissing small towns. I am not dissing Tennessee. I am not dissing anything except that I did not belong there. That was not my place. So anyways, I wound up in Tennessee in this house with my grandmother, a huge Victorian ancient house. There was like 4 floors, like the full attic, a basement, which for some reason I never went into, which is like so odd considering who I am now. And like riddled with ghost stories, this old house. Probably one of the more haunted places I've ever lived in. But I'm only going to tell you the one story about that involves the Nukekubi. Nukekubi. So I'm looking at chat helping me pronounce this word. But the day in question was my grandmother had gone across the street to have tea or coffee or something like that with Mrs. Jacobs, which was our elderly neighbor. And she did this like every Friday, I think. And every Friday when she did this, my habit was to go sneak into her bar. They owned a bar, and they always had lots of alcohol around. And at 13, that's what you do when your grandmother goes across the street. And it was my sampling day. So, and I had all the bottles moved around in an order so I could sample a little bit of everything and know what everything tasted like. I never really got drunk or anything like that. I just wanted to taste everything, and it was illegal and it was forbidden. So, that's the exact reason to do this. So this day, my grandmother had gone across the street to talk to Mrs. Jacobs, and I headed into this little parlor room. It was the right corner front room. Oh, this was actually where my office is. If this was the same house, this is where my office is now. But it was the right front room next to the front door. So you'd come in the front door. Oh, you can't see my finger. Come in the front door and you'd come to the right, and that's where this room was. So I had gone into this room to nip some booze, and the bar was, it's so weird, I think you can see my hands. The bar was over against the window kind of here, and that was the front window facing the street where Mrs. Jacobs and my grandmother was. And the other window had a stereo next to it. And then in the middle of this room, ancient old house, huge chandelier with all the little crystal things, I don't even know what you call those, jingly things, was hanging from it. So I go popping in there to sneak my little tastes of booze. I think I was on creme de menthe. For some reason, I always taste creme de menthe when I think of this story. But I went in there, and I had gotten kind of about a foot in or 2 feet. Like, I basically walked into the room, and I heard tapping, 3 taps on the stereo across the way from me. And anybody who is of age to be wise can remember those stereos that had those old plastic covers. I mean, I'm sorry, this actually had a record player. This is, this is old. But it was a record player with that plastic record player cover that came on those. And anyways, as I'm sitting there, or as I walk in, I hear 3 distinct slow taps. Just tap, tap, tap. And of course I stopped because I'm A, alone in this house, and B, I'm trying to figure out what is hitting the stereo, because it's away from the wall. There's nothing touching this stereo cabinet cover or this record player cover. So, like in the horror movies, the person like is moving to the closet or to the noise, the strange noise, and you're always like, oh my God, don't do that. I was so doing that because I was curious, what is making that noise? So I had moved forward very slowly, and I'm trying to peer around that plastic cover to see what's on the other side, to see what's touching it. Is it a mouse or something? When all of a sudden, and this is really hard to describe, but I heard a noise that was not in my ears. It's like in my head. That sounds, the white coats are coming right now. But I could hear this like storm noise, like a whooshing, crazy, loud noise. And it was, like I said, in my head, but I could tell the direction it was coming from. And it was coming from the chandelier. So, of course, that was more attention needed than the stereo cover. I forgot the stereo cover at this point. And I looked up at the chandelier, and the thing was vibrating. And this whooshing noise was like filling it somehow. And I know my descriptions are not they don't make sense, but that's how in my head it is, or my memory. But all the little things are like jingling together, and in the sparkly bits and the chains and all the whatnot stuff, the sparkly stuff that makes up a chandelier, I could see something sitting in there. But it was something, it was transparent, and it looked like those heat waves over a fire, or like over a hot road, you get those little distortions. That's what it looked like, but kind of like sitting in the chandelier. And so, what was my facial expression at that moment? Probably because, I had no flipping clue what was happening. I don't even think I was scared at that moment. It was just kind of like what the hell is going on? Like, what is that? And as I'm staring at it, and we're all good, it's in the chandelier, and I'm down on the carpet, and that's a good distance. And all of a sudden, it dives at me. And so I fled. I zipped out. Probably now when I think back, I'm like, why didn't I just run out of the whole house? But what I did was run outside that door. And probably in my adolescent mind, I had some concept that it was protecting the booze, or I'd been busted, or, the ghost of the bar, had caught me. But so I ran out of that room, and I turned around to see if it was following me. And there it was in the doorway, that same shimmering distortion, and that like incredible noise of like tempest, like wind and shrieking or something. I mean, and it was like I couldn't hear anything else. There was no other noise except for what was in my head, that shrieking noise. So anyways, it's hovering in the door. And again, I probably had the expression, and that was also fine. I guess we probably would have stood like that for a long time, but it rushed at me again. And this time, yes, I was out the front door. I went out the front door, and I stood on the porch, and in my mind, I can remember thinking, like, where do I go? And how far is it going to come after me? Like, I had the idea that it's stuck in the house. But also I had this weird concept that if I ran and it caught me, nobody would ever find me. Like, I would, who knows what would happen. I was 13. Logic was not really a strong point to me. But anyways, I stood on the porch, and my back was to the door, which was a glass screen door. Like, there was a wooden door with glass stuff in it, like lead pane glass in it, and that was open. And it was just the glass screen door at this point that had slammed behind me. And I wound up sitting down. Like, I stood like that for a long time, and I'm waiting for my grandmother. I can see her, well, not her house, but the house across the street where she is. And so I'm petrified, and I'm standing on the porch waiting for her. And I wound up sitting down at some point, and that noise is in my head, and it won't stop, that whirring, whooshing noise. And maybe I was a little bit disoriented too, like, because I can't hear anything. So I sat down, and then this weird thing wound up happening where I could see the house in front of me, but it was like having two sets of eyes. I could see the house in front of me, but I could see the door behind me, but like really clearly, like absolute every detail of the door. And in the doorway, there was a head floating there looking at me through the glass. And it was wet, and it was a she, as far as I could tell, and she had hair stuck, like she was soaking wet, and she was dripping into the carpet. And she wasn't bloody or anything, but her neck had been ripped, and so the cords were dangling, and they were like blue, and everything was kind of swollen-y. And I, to this day, have never seen a drowned body, but that's what I imagine it would look like. And her mouth was open, and she was just shrieking, and the water was like running down her face, and like I said, the hair stuck all over her. And she was just silently screaming at me. And I think the wind might have stopped at this point or not, but I didn't hear her screaming, or maybe all that wind was her. But anyway, she was just staring at me like this with her mouth open, kind of like in a silent scream, until my grandmother came back. And I have no idea when my grandmother came back. Like, I have no idea how much time passed with us doing this. But when I saw my grandmother, everything just kind of, it was back. The sound was gone. I couldn't see the door behind me. I could only see with my normal forward-facing eyes, I guess. And so my grandmother came up, and I guess I probably looked pretty freaked out, because one of the first things she said was, "What's wrong?" I'm sorry, she was Southern. "What's wrong, Angie?" And I don't even know what I said at that point. But I know I told her a little bit about what happened, and I think I was a little bit worried. Sorry, my nose started sniffling. I was a little bit worried about being crazy, maybe. I don't know. Who knows what you think at 13? I surely don't. But I wound up telling her enough that she freaked out, and we moved. I want to say that night, like, we packed up, and we wound up going to this smelly house with a bunch of dusty furniture in it, and I never saw that place again. Well, actually, I did, but years and years later, when I went back to just see it as I was passing through that area, and that's a whole nother story. The ghosts were gone. But that is my story of the Nukekubi. I did not know to call it that. I didn't know that was a name for anything in particular, until I was doing the research for Tortured Willows, which is that poetry book we just came out with yesterday. And I had really been dipping into like my Asian heritage and my roots and the ghost stories I had grown up with and the things that we had seen. And so somebody mentioned that in chat, and for some reason the word just stuck with me. And I had not even thought of this story that happened in Tennessee in ages. And they said that, and I looked it up, and a Nukekubi is a ghost who is just, it's a head. That's all it is a head that's been ripped from a body, and it floats around. And I mean, you can look it up because I can't actually remember all the things that it does, but I just remember that description and me kind of going, oh crap, that sounds exactly like what I had thought was looking at me through the window of that house when I was 13. And so then I've been wondering, if that is in the Nukekubi, what was she doing in Sweetwater, Tennessee? And also I was wondering at that time, what was I doing in Sweetwater, Tennessee? But both of us were there, so I kind of almost feel a little bit sorry for her right now that that happened. So that she got stuck in Sweetwater, Tennessee with me. But that is that ghost story of the Nukekubi and my experience with seeing that ghost. And there, like I said, there's a lot of stories I could tell, but I will not do that today because this is Spec Fair and we have a lot going on today. But I am really thinking about telling 13 of these stories for the 13 days of Halloween, which I like to celebrate starting on the 19th. So I may wind up doing this and just tell a series of these ghost stories that I remember growing up and the different weird things happened to me. But for now, I am going to share my screen again before I leave you, and I'm going to read you that poem about the Nukekubi, because technology be damned, we can move forward. So this is a page out of Tortured Willows, and this is that poem that I wrote about the Nukekubi. I thought she was there, just for me, my own terror, a resident ghost. It made sense to me. The house was Victorian in the deep, deep South. Such places have ghosts. She hung behind me mid-air, her face contorted, her hair streaming down, plastered to her shrieking face. Silent, hateful screams. Like slick tentacles, her neck cords trailed to the ground, disembodied face soaked wet from drowning, or perhaps from her own tears. She couldn't tell me. My Nukekubi, out of place in Tennessee, out of place like me. And I will stop sharing that now. Oh, and there's one final little note that I should say based on this ghost story. My grandmother told me, like, probably maybe a couple weeks or a month afterwards, and like everything that my grandmother ever said, my Southern grandma, you have to take with a huge grain of salt, because she also was a storyteller. She just didn't publish hers. But she told me after the fact that the reason why she had moved so fast was because the people that had lived in that house before us, like ages before us, like the 20s or something, had been driving to Knoxville, Tennessee. And anybody who's been in that area knows how very hilly that area is. There's lots of little cliffs and stuff like that. And they had been driving to Knoxville, Tennessee. I swear to God, this is what my grandmother said. So, you know, who knows? It sounds very Hollywood to me. But they were driving to an opera or some kind of fancy party in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I feel my grandmother judging me right now. What, you calling me a liar? But no, just saying, got to take this with a grain of salt. But anyways, they were driving to Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were behind a truck that had like plywood or sheet metal or something behind it or on top of it, and it came loose, and the plywood or sheet metal or whatever that truck was hauling came through and sliced their heads off in their convertible, and they went off the road and down into the water because it was along this, and I actually know this turn of the road, which is kind of creepy and crazy, but they went off and they went into the river that's down there, and they drowned, and the family had retrieved their things and brought them back to this house. And so that's why she thought that the house was haunted, and she thought it was them, or the woman of these guys. But what she didn't know, and why I kind of do take her story a little bit seriously, is because she didn't know that those people had left a bunch of their stuff. Like there was people's stuff left in that house in this, like, you know how I told you could go in the attic? There was like a weird dressing room or kind of cupboard thing there. And I would go up there and I would play dress up with the things. And there was like, I didn't know it at the time, but there were cufflinks and furs with like weird stiff fur, like, you know, those stoles, the fur, fancy stoles and gloves and funny little pictures that were printed on glass. And I'm not proud of this, but I may have accidentally taken some of those things with me when we left, which led to more adventures. But for now, we'll just leave it at that. That yes, there was weird little old, I want to say old people stuff, um, objects of antiquity left in this house that I used to play with all the time. So I kind of take everything she says with a grain of salt, but I also don't completely discount that one. So that is my story of the Nukekubi. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoy Spec Fair. I didn't really get to tell you because I did tell you, but you guys just weren't listening. About Spec Fair, you go to specfair.com with an E on it. Actually, I can share my screen again. Share screen. And there, and get rid of that. But yes, if you go to specfair.com, this is the lineup we have going on right now. All of these are links. So next up, we're going to have Spooky Tiara Workshop and Music with Amy Zollers. And I will be on my phone because apparently I have no speaker anymore or no microphone. That is kicking off in, 19 minutes. So you can see that. You can see all of the things coming up. We've got interview with Leonard Spicer, Linda D. Addison speaking with Poetry and Power. She is one of the most powerful poets that I know, and women. Then at 4, we have Meet the Publishers. First time ever, Gordon Linsner, the founder of Space and Time magazine, Hildy Silverman, the second publisher, and I are all in one virtual room talking about all things space and time, where it's been, where it's going, and where it is now. And then, yeah, just from there, we're going to end up at 6 with a screening of Tarantulas, which is a short horror film that I directed ages, like 5 years ago, feels like ages, and with a team of wonderful people. And the music has been fixed. There was some issues with the music. And anyways, that has been fixed. It's a short silent film filmed in Niceville, Florida, which is a scary enough place anyways. And then I'll be headed to the Pragley Lounge, which I will get to at that time. I will talk about that. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for letting me know that nobody could hear me, because that would be like really hilarious in the end to do all of that. And yeah, for crickets. But yes, and thank you to the chat. And if I have missed anything, any questions or anything, I will try to answer them in just a minute. But thank you so much, guys. And yeah, I think I will be on my phone for this today. So thank God there is not a lot of live stuff for me. So, and happy Spec Fair. We will be back next month on the 8th for the next November Spec Fair. And yeah, so just watch for announcements about that. And if you have any workshops or anything like that that you would like to share or present, absolutely. All right, thank you. And I will talk to you later. And happy Halloween. Watch out for those Nukekubi.